Hi, my name is Jenna. I will be walking with you through Session 3 and Session 4 of this workshop. Session 3 is broken down into Parts 1 and Part 2. In Part 1, we will be discussing what to expect. The contents of this workshop will be the stages of grief, how to identify stages of grief, and what emotional reactions you may experience through grief. Grief is not a disorder, a disease, or a sign of weakness. It is an emotional, physical, and spiritual necessity. The price you pay for love. The only cure for grief is to grieve. By Earl Grolman. What came up for you after listening to that quote? I encourage you to ponder over your current emotional journey and take time to reflect in your workbook of what emotions might have come up for you. The goal here is to identify current emotions out of a situation and be able to put a name towards it, whether it be positive or negative. For example, some might feel like they are stuck. But what ways could you describe that feeling of being stuck? Like, does it create tightness in your chest? Do you get butterflies in your stomach? Go ahead and press pause for a moment and write down your ideas in your workbook. Change can be really hard, but why is change so hard? Change, transformation, alteration, however one may choose to name it, can be seen all around us. Whether this change is taking public transportation rather than an Uber, making healthier lifestyle choices, or placing a child for adoption, change makes people a little uneasy. Here we broke down why change is a challenge. There's a fear of adapting, emotionally threatened security, and there's a tendency to focus on the negative. All of these are parts of the natural process of change. Grief can be thought of as change because anything lost brings change. This is an interconnected relationship. So grief can be defined as a normal and natural emotional reaction to loss or change of any kind. Behavioral change is rarely a discrete or single event. However, we tend to view it that way. More often than not, behavioral change occurs gradually over time. The trans-theoretical model of behavior change identifies the various stages through which individuals move when attempting to adjust old habits or form new behaviors. A linear progression through the stages is not the norm. Individuals tend to move back and forth through the stages, recycling through them until the change becomes fully established. The stages of grief are numbness, yearning and searching, disorganization, reorganization. The goal here is to not get over it, but rather learn to adapt and live with it. Now, let's break down the process of grief. First is numbness. The first reaction to learning about the terminal illness, loss, or death of a cherished loved one is to deny the reality of the situation. This isn't happening. This can't be happening. People often think. It is a normal reaction to rationalize over overwhelming emotions. Denial is a common defense mechanism that buffers the immediate shock of the loss, numbing us to our emotions. We block out the words and hide from the facts. We start to believe that life is meaningless and nothing is of any value any longer. For most people experiencing grief, this stage is a temporary response that carries us through the first wave of pain. The next stage is yearning and searching. This stage is categorized by the grieving person longing or yearning for the return of the child that they placed, in order to fill the void that has been placed within them. Many emotions are experienced and expressed during this time, such as weeping, anger, anxiety, preoccupation, and confusion. The next stage is disorganization and despair. The grieving person often desires to withdraw and disengage from others and the activities he or she regularly enjoyed. Having accepted the reality of the loss, the bereaved's feelings of searching and yearning become less intense, while feelings of apathy, anger, despair, and hopelessness and questioning increase. And finally, there's the reorganization and recovery phase. The grieving person begins to return to a new state of normal. Weight loss experienced during intense grieving might reverse. Energy levels increase, and interest in enjoyable activities returns. Grief never ends, but thoughts of sadness and despair diminish while positive memories of the placed child take over. Because everyone grieves in his or her own way and own pace, there is no specific or usual amount of time in which people experience these phases. Here are some tips on ways to cope with grief. When we take care of ourselves physically, we fasten the recovery to our mental health. Embrace your emotions. Accept your feelings, have good company, practice mindfulness, go for a hike, color, do some pottery, even meditate. Set a regular sleep schedule and get extra rest. Move your body, go on daily walks, stretch, do some yoga, and have goals. Have a to-do list for yourself. Okay, let's pause. That was probably a lot to think about, but now we can go to page 8 in the workbook and complete the activity for session 3, part 1. Thank you so much for participating in part 1, and I'm looking forward to meet with you in part 2. Thank you. Hello, this is part 2 of session 3. Welcome back. In this session, we will discuss who is in your circle of support. We will go over your safe place, how counseling can be beneficial, and how to find quality support groups. So why is support important? As we talked about in part 1, change can lead us to natural feelings of grief. Grief can feel isolating and overwhelming. It is helpful to share how you are feeling with a safe person. It is helpful to talk out loud about how you are feeling, so you can make sense of your thoughts and get them out into the open. Professionals like counselors are great examples of safe people that can help us navigate through these kinds of emotions while in a safe environment. But it's also important to have people to help you along the way. So what does a counselor do? You might know what a counselor does. Maybe you have gone to counseling before. Maybe you know of someone who has gone to counseling. On this slide, I wanted to provide a few key points of what a counselor does. They can teach us how to cope with overwhelming emotions. They can provide a safe environment for us to express pain and fears. They can guide us through the decision-making process. They can ensure that we are making a choice that is best for our needs and values. And they can help our family and friends understand what it is that we are going through. They can also help us learn how to process and manage our own feelings. It can be challenging to find a counselor that we feel comfortable with or a counselor that we truly feel like we can connect with. If you have gone to counseling before and feel like maybe it wasn't the right place for you, I encourage you to give it another chance. As we try to make life-changing decisions, such as placing a child for adoption, counselors can really help us learn about the decision-making process, and they can help us navigate through our feelings, and they can teach us how to cope with overwhelming emotions around this process. Having this kind of support can be really helpful, especially when we find ourselves in the reorganization stage of the grieving process. Counselors help us make sense of the process that we just came out of, and they help us find normalcy within our emotions once again. What other forms of support are available? It can be encouraging and helpful to hear from others who are experiencing the things that you are also experiencing. There are different groups like Facebook groups, community support groups, and religious groups that are available to support you. Facebook groups could be important because there are many places on social media that offer support to birth parents. Facebook is a great place to join a group and connect with others. There are also blogs that you can follow where people share their personal journeys of placing a child. In session 4, You can find more online resources that we have listed for you to find blogs and groups where you could connect and feel supported. Sometimes it's helpful to be face to face with other people and find the connection and support within that type of a group. Community groups are a good way to find that kind of connection. You can ask your doctor or counselor to provide you with information about a local community support group in your area. Meeting other birth parents can be an effective form of support. Having a connection to people who are going through what you are experiencing is a great way to feel understood. Another way to seek out support is through religious groups. If you attend a church in your area, ask your pastor to connect you with people who would be supportive in your journey through adoption. It can be comforting to be connected with people who share your same values in whatever form that may be. Congratulations! You have completed Part 2 of Session 3. Now it is time to reflect on what you learned in your notes. You can turn to page 10 in your workbook and complete the activity that has been presented there. This activity guides you in finding your safe place and the safe people who you can lean on in order to find support.